welcome back to Chat Like a Native. Building a strong vocabulary, it's really key to speaking English fluently.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
we're going to ditch those boring word lists and dictionaries today.
Yeah, right.
We're going to be diving deep into how to learn vocabulary naturally.
Yes.
Picking up words as you encounter them in the real world.
That's right.
It's
It's all about making knowledge practical.
Yeah,
How does this natural method work?
exactly.
How can this work for our listeners?
Yeah, so much of language learning is just kind of based on this idea of rote memorization.
Right.
And it's you might pass a vocab test,
You might.
but will you remember those words
Yeah, will you remember them next week?
next week, right?
Or even...
Even if you do.
Yeah.
Using them correctly in a real conversation.
Exactly.
That's a whole other ballgame.
It really is.
So I really like this idea of ditching the dictionary and embracing experience.
I love that.
And,
Yeah.
it makes me think about reading and how reading is not just for bookworms.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You can choose books or articles or blogs on topics that genuinely interest you.
Mm-hmm.
I
That's the key.
think that's one of the biggest things is that if you're not interested, you're not going to retain it.
Exactly.
So you're reading something that you're really into and you come across an unfamiliar word.
Yeah.
What should you do?
So I think this is a great opportunity to jot down the word
Okay.
and the sentence it's used in.
Okay.
This gives you so much context
Right.
because you learn not just the meaning of the word, but kind of the flavor of the word as well.
That's so interesting.
It is.
And that's something that I think a lot of language learners miss out on.
You do.
Is that we can look up the dictionary definition.
Yeah.
But we don't really understand the nuances.
And nuances, right?
How it's used in
Continuous.
different contexts.
And that's what will really help you sound more natural.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And kind of moving off of reading.
Yes.
I think a lot of people forget that listening is such a valuable tool as well.
It is.
And I'm talking about movies, TV shows, podcasts.
All of it.
All of it.
Yeah.
These are like gold mines
They are.
for natural language.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you're watching or listening to something like that, you don't really have the luxury of stopping and looking up every single word.
Right.
But do you have any tips for how we make the most of that?
I would say to start with subtitles.
Okay.
Especially if you're dealing with unfamiliar accents. Or just fast-paced dialogue in general.
Yeah.
And then challenge yourself to go without.
Oh.
Yeah, so think of subtitles as training wheels.
I like that.
It's just a little bit of support while you're getting accustomed to the rhythm and flow.
Right, of how people actually speak.
Yes.
Yeah, not just
Yeah.
textbook English.
Exactly, because textbook English is great for learning the basics. But real conversations are a little different.
Yeah, a little bit messier.
A little messier.
But more fun.
More fun. Way more fun.
Yeah, so pay attention to those different accents.
Yeah.
Pay attention to how people actually speak.
Mm-hmm.
And something that I always get tripped up on are idioms
Yes.
and slang.
Oh, slang.
Because they're so
Tricky.
tricky.
Yeah.
How do we even
Why do you...
begin to make sense of those?
Well, I think the key here is to focus on the context.
Right.
Idioms and slang expressions, they derive their meaning from the situations in which they're used.
Yeah.
So don't just try to memorize them in isolation.
Okay.
You really need to pay attention to how they're used.
So it's like a puzzle.
It is a puzzle.
Right.
But the pieces are all there in the conversation.
You just have to kind of
You just have to look for them.
find them and put them together. Yeah. And I think that could be a really fun part of language learning too.
Yes.
Is that, it's like you're solving these little mysteries.
Exactly. And then you get to use them.
And then you get to use them. Yeah.
Which is the best part.
Which is the best part.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say we've diligently jotted down all these new words and phrases
Okay.
that we've encountered through reading, through listening.
Mm-hmm.
How do we actually, integrate those
Yeah. How do we use them?
into our spoken and written English?
Okay, so imagine
Yeah.
these new words and phrases as shiny new tools
Right.
in your language toolbox.
I like that.
Yeah, and the more you use them, the more familiar and comfortable
Yeah.
they become.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to experiment.
Mm.
Start by incorporating them into your writing,
Well-
whether it's emails, journal entries, social media posts.
So low pressure kind of situations.
Yeah, low pressure.
Where you can kind of just play around with them.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
see how they feel
Mm.
in your own sentences.
And what about speaking?
Oh, yeah.
Like, I know a lot of learners feel hesitant
Oh, they do.
to use new vocabulary in real-life conversations.
I understand that hesitation.
Yeah.
But language is meant to be spoken.
It is.
So find opportunities to interact with other English speakers.
Okay.
Whether it's joining a language exchange group, participating in online forums, or even just striking up a conversation with a friendly face at a local cafe.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Just get out there and use the language.
But I think, one of the biggest things that holds people back is that fear of making a mistake.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah.
So what do we do about that?
Mistakes are inevitable.
They are.
And they're actually valuable learning opportunities.
Okay.
Think of them as feedback guiding you toward greater fluency.
So it's like we need to reframe our mindset.
Yes.
To think of mistakes as like not a bad thing.
Not a bad thing at all.
But actually like a stepping stone.
Stepping stone
to getting better.
Exactly.
Yeah. So don't let the fear of making mistakes hold you back from speaking.
Right.
Embrace those stumbles, learn from them, and keep practicing.
I love that.
Yeah.
But sometimes I feel like even with all this effort that I put in, I still worry about forgetting new words.
I understand.
Yeah.
Well, that's a common concern.
Yeah.
And it really highlights the importance of spaced repetition.
Okay.
So instead of cramming a bunch of new words into your brain all at once, you need to space out your learning over time.
So it's about consistency.
It's about consistency.
Over time.
Over time, yes.
Yeah, okay.
And review those new words and phrases regularly, even if you think you've mastered them.
Oh, wow.
Because, sometimes...
It's like you can't just learn it once and then forget about it.
No.
You need
to keep coming back to it.
Coming back to it, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so that's great advice.
Good.
But, I think a lot of our listeners are probably thinking,
yes.
Okay, this all sounds great, but I have a life.
Right.
I have, work and kids and all these other things.
Exactly.
How do I make vocabulary acquisition like a natural part of my routine?
Okay, so one technique that I really love is to transform your surroundings into a language-rich environment.
What does that look like?
So, for example, you can label objects around your home with their English names.
Oh.
Yeah, from everyday items like refrigerator, sofa.
I can label my refrigerator.
Yes,
okay.
And your sofa.
Okay.
But then go a little further.
Okay.
Spatula, doorknob.
So the more specific, the better.
The more specific, the better.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's amazing how much this can help just by seeing those words every day.
It's about creating that immersive environment.
It is, even in your own home.
Even in your own home.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's fun. It's a fun little project.
Yeah. I'm sold. I'm going to go home and label everything.
Yes.
But what about,
What about?
In terms of my hobbies and interests?
Oh, yes.
Like, how can I
absolutely
incorporate vocabulary into those?
Think about your passions.
Okay.
Whether it's cooking, music, photography, travel.
Yeah.
Deliberately seek out English language resources that are related to those interests.
Okay.
So if you love cooking, read cookbooks in English.
Right.
Watch cooking shows in English. Listen to podcasts about cooking.
Right. Yeah.
Find online communities.
So it's about finding that overlap.
It is.
Between your passions.
Exactly.
And the language. You're learning. Yeah. I love that.
It's fun.
And, we live in a digital age.
We do.
So how can we leverage technology to enhance our natural vocabulary acquisition journey?
Yeah. There are so many digital tools and resources available.
Right.
So language learning apps can be incredibly effective for practicing vocabulary in a fun and interactive way.
Yeah.
So look for apps that offer spaced repetition, personalized quizzes, even games that challenge you to use new words in different contexts.
So it's about finding something that's engaging, that's not going to feel like a chore.
Exactly, because if it feels like a chore, you're not going to do it.
Yeah, you're not going to stick with it.
You're not going to stick with it.
Exactly.
Right.
But, before we go too far down that road of specific strategies and tips, I want to take a step back and think about the science behind natural vocabulary acquisition.
Yes.
Like what's actually happening.
Yeah. What's going on
in our brains when we learn new words in this way.
So it's not simply about memorizing definitions.
Right.
It's about creating a rich tapestry of connections in our minds.
Okay.
So when we encounter new words and contexts, our brains work tirelessly to integrate them into our existing knowledge networks.
So it's about building upon what we already know.
Exactly. And this deep processing, it creates stronger neural pathways, making that information stick better.
So it's not just rote memorization.
No.
It's like...
It's about making a meaningful connection.
Yes.
And like creating this mental map.
A mental map, exactly.
Of the language.
Yes.
Okay.
And the more connections we make, the easier it becomes to recall and use those words naturally.
Right.
So think of it like building a network of roads in your mind.
Okay.
The more roads you build, the easier it is to navigate from one point to another.
So we're not just talking about individual words here.
No, we're not.
We're talking about
the whole system.
The whole system, yeah.
Of how those words act together.
Like how they work together to create meaning.
And how they, relate to grammar and syntax and cultural context.
All of it.
All of it.
Yes, because when we learn vocabulary naturally, we're not just acquiring isolated words.
Right.
We're absorbing the rhythm and flow of the language.
It's like we're learning the music of the language.
The music of the language.
Not just the individual notes.
Exactly.
I love that.
And this natural learning process, it extends beyond just cognitive benefits.
Okay.
It also taps into our emotional intelligence.
Oh.
Yeah, because when we engage with material that genuinely interests us, whether it's a captivating novel or a thought-provoking podcast, we're more likely to remember those new words and phrases because they're associated with positive emotion.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's not just about cramming information into our brains. It's about creating a positive and engaging learning experience.
It's about making it fun.
It's about making it fun.
Yeah, exactly.
And when it's fun, you want to do it more.
You want to keep doing it.
Yeah.
And the more you do it, the better you get.
Exactly.
So it's a win-win situation.
This has been such a fantastic exploration of like the foundations of natural vocabulary acquisition.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
But we've only just scratched the surface.
Yes, we've only just begun.
We've been talking about all these different ways to learn vocabulary naturally. And I think it's important as we go deeper into this to find that balance between immersing ourselves in the real world and having some kind of structured approach.
Okay, yeah. So how do we make sure we're not just like randomly picking up words, but actually building like
a solid foundation?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
I think it's about being intentional with our language learning journey.
Okay.
So immersion is crucial.
Right.
But we also need to be strategic about how we approach it.
So it's not just about like letting it happen.
It's not about just hoping for the best.
Right. We have to be
active.
Active participants.
Yes.
Okay.
Think of it like exploring a vast and beautiful forest.
Okay.
You could just wander aimlessly and stumble upon some interesting plants and trees.
Right.
But wouldn't it be more enriching to have a map, a guide, or even a specific destination in mind?
So how do we create that map or that guide for our vocabulary journey?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
One effective strategy is to focus on thematic learning.
What does that mean?
So think about your interests, your goals.
Okay.
The areas where you need to expand your vocabulary.
Okay.
Let's say you're passionate about cooking. You dream of understanding those mouth-watering recipes in English language cookbooks.
Yes, I do.
That's a fantastic starting point.
Okay.
Immerse yourself in that world.
Okay.
Watch cooking shows. Read culinary blogs.
Okay.
Even try following recipes in English.
So we're like building a vocabulary cluster around a specific theme.
Yes.
Okay.
So you're not just learning random words. You're building a mini dictionary within your mind.
That's so cool.
Tailored to your interests and needs.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
But as we go through and we're building all these words, how do we make sure they stick?
So that's where the power of spaced repetition comes in.
Okay, I've heard of that.
Yes.
But I'm not really sure what it is.
So imagine you're learning to play a new song on the piano.
Okay.
You wouldn't just practice it once.
Right.
And expect to master it.
No, you have to practice it over and over.
You have to revisit that song regularly. Reinforce those finger movements and melodies until they become second nature.
So it's the same thing with language.
It's the same thing with language.
Okay.
You need to keep coming back to those words and phrases.
So it's about consistency over time.
Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there are so many great tools out there to help you with that.
Okay, like what?
Well, there are digital tools, like language learning apps, that use algorithms to track your progress.
Oh, wow.
And they present you with flashcards at just the right intervals.
Oh, that's interesting.
To maximize retention.
So it's like having a personal trainer.
It is like having a personal trainer.
For your vocabulary.
For your vocabulary.
I love that.
And sometimes those old-fashioned methods are still the best.
I like those too.
I love notebooks and flashcards.
Me too.
There's something so satisfying.
There is.
About physically writing down those words.
Yeah.
And creating our own personalized study aids.
It's like we're really taking ownership of the learning process.
Yes, and the act of writing can be so powerful for memory consolidation.
Okay.
Yeah.
But, all of this takes work.
It does.
And sometimes I feel like I'm really motivated.
Yeah.
And then other times I'm just like,
I get it.
Oh, I want to do this.
Yeah. Motivation can definitely wane.
Yeah. So how do we keep that spark alive?
So one strategy that I find really helpful is to celebrate small victories along the way.
Okay.
So don't just focus on that end goal of fluency.
Right.
Take the time to acknowledge your progress.
Oh.
No matter how small.
So if I learn one new word.
If you learn one new word.
That's a victory.
That's a victory.
Okay, I like
it.
Yeah.
Did you successfully use a new word in a conversation?
Ooh.
Give yourself a pat on the back.
I like it.
Yeah. So it's like rewarding ourselves with little treats along the hiking trail.
Ooh. I like that analogy.
It keeps us energized.
Yeah.
And motivated to reach the summit.
So we need to find those things that keep us going.
We need to find what works for us as individuals.
Right, because we're not all the same.
Not at all.
Right, like some people love apps.
Right.
Some people love
flashcards.
Flashcards, right?
Some people need to talk to people.
Right.
Some people need to be by themselves with a book.
Right.
So it's really about figuring out what works best for you.
So it's about personalization.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And tailoring your approach accordingly.
Got it.
And remember, language learning is not a race.
It's not.
It's a journey, a lifelong adventure
Yeah.
of exploration and discovery.
It really is.
So embrace the process. Enjoy the ride.
I love that.
Yeah.
And celebrate every milestone along the way.
That's such good advice.
I hope so.
This has been such an insightful conversation.
It has.
I feel like I'm walking away with like so many
great ideas and strategies.
I'm glad to hear that.
But before we wrap up this whole deep dive, I want to talk about something that I think is really important.
Okay.
And it's this idea of like moving beyond just understanding words and definitions.
Okay.
To like truly internalizing them.
That's a great point.
Right.
Yeah.
How do we make them?
How do we make them?
A part of us.
A part of us.
Who we are.
That's the key, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's about bridging that gap between passive recognition and active usage. So like, for example, we can all recognize the word exquisite.
Right.
But how many of us actually use it?
Right. In everyday conversations.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So it's like having a beautiful painting hanging in your living room.
Oh.
But never really taking the time to appreciate its details.
Right.
And let its colors evoke emotions within us.
So how do we move beyond just recognizing those words?
Okay, so one powerful technique is to actively seek out opportunities to use them.
Oh.
Even if it feels a bit awkward or unnatural at first.
So push ourselves outside of our comfort zones a little bit.
Exactly.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to experiment with new words and phrases in your writing, even if it means making a few mistakes along the way.
So it's kind of like with fashion, right?
It is.
You try on different outfits.
Yes.
Until you find one.
You find one that feels right.
That expresses who you are.
That expresses your unique style.
Exactly.
Yeah. And our linguistic style, it evolves over time as we experiment with different words and phrases.
So the more we use those words,
the more we use them,
the more they become a part of who we are.
We become woven into the tapestry of our language.
I love that.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes people hit a plateau.
They do.
Right?
Yeah, it's common.
Like you're learning and you're learning, and then it's like...
And then you hit a wall.
You hit a wall.
You know, and you're like...
What do I do now?
What do I do?
So first of all, don't get discouraged.
Okay.
It's normal. Yeah. It's a natural part of the process.
So it's not a sign of failure?
Not at all.
Okay.
It might just be a sign that you need to shake things up a bit.
Okay. Like how...
Well, ask yourself.
Yeah.
Are you still engaging with material that excites you? Are you challenging yourself enough?
So, like, if I've been reading the same kind of books, maybe I need to...
Maybe you need to try a different genre.
Branch out.
Yes, branch out.
Okay.
Or maybe you need to find a new podcast.
Okay.
Or maybe you need to have deeper conversations in English.
Push myself a little bit.
Exactly.
Okay.
So sometimes we need to step back and reassess our approach.
Yeah.
And remember, growth often happens outside our comfort zones.
That's so true.
So embrace those moments of challenge.
Okay.
And see them as opportunities for expansion and transformation.
I love that.
I think this conversation has been so valuable.
It has been a good conversation.
For me personally.
I'm glad.
And I hope our listeners are feeling inspired.
Inspired to take
ownership.
Take ownership of your learning.
Of their learning.
Yeah.
We've been talking about like really internalizing vocabulary.
Yes. Making them our own.
Right. And as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into natural vocabulary acquisition, I'm wondering, how do we know when we've mastered a word?
That is the question, isn't it?
It is.
I think, it goes beyond just recognizing the meaning.
Okay.
It's about integrating those words into our linguistic repertoire to the point where they become an extension of our thoughts and expressions.
So they just flow naturally.
They just flow.
Okay.
Yes. It's about developing a sense of ownership over those words.
Okay.
Feeling comfortable and confident using them in a variety of contexts.
So it's kind of like, when you learn a new skill.
Yes.
Like riding a bike.
Exactly.
Or playing a musical instrument.
It's the same thing.
At first, it's really hard.
It is.
You're going to make mistakes.
I'm going to fall off that bike a few times.
Right, and it's going to be frustrating.
It can be.
But the more you practice...
The more you practice.
The more you do it...
The better you get.
The better you get. And then eventually...
And then one day...
You don't even have to think about it.
You're just writing.
Yeah. And it's the same...
Just speaking.
It's the same with words.
It is.
It's like you don't even have to think about it anymore.
Yeah, you just use them.
You just use them.
Naturally.
But it's important to remember
Yeah.
that mastery is not a destination.
Okay.
It's a continuous journey.
So we never really stop learning.
We never stop learning.
It is exciting.
It is exciting.
Right.
Because there's always something new to discover.
Yeah. And it's like, we might feel really confident using a word in one context.
But then we encounter it in a different context.
Exactly.
And we're like, ooh.
And there's a whole new layer of meaning.
A whole new layer.
Yeah.
That's cool.
It is cool.
And I think it's important to remember, too,
yes,
that we don't have to do this alone.
We absolutely do not.
Right. Like language learning can feel very solitary sometimes.
It can.
But it doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be at all.
Right. There are so many.
There are communities online.
Yeah, in person who are going through the same thing.
Yeah, going through the same struggles.
And we can learn from each other.
We can learn from each other.
And support each other.
Absolutely.
Right.
It's like we're all on this journey together.
We're all on this journey together.
Yeah.
I love that.
And as we wrap up, I want to encourage everyone to embrace the beauty of the English language.
Okay.
With all its quirks.
Yes, it's a quirky language.
It is a quirky language. But that's part of what makes it so fun.
Right. Like, sometimes I get frustrated with all the, the exceptions. The exceptions to the rules.
Yeah.
But then I also kind of
But it keeps it interesting.
It keeps it interesting.
It's like a puzzle.
Yeah, it's like solving a puzzle.
Yeah.
Well, this has been such a wonderful...
It has a deep dive.
A deep dive, and I'm feeling so inspired.
I'm so glad.
To continue my language learning journey.
That's the goal.
So, to all of our listeners out there, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for listening.
On this deep dive.
Keep learning, keep chatting.
Yes, and keep embracing the joy of learning English.
Exactly.
We'll see you next time.
Bye for now.